I am Rachel Mitchell, 28, and I spent 4 years of my youth locked away for something I never did. Before everything shattered, my childhood was picture perfect. Loving parents, a beautiful Connecticut home, and a sister I adored. Then, Olivia accused me of the unthinkable, and my parents let them take me away. The system swallowed me whole until years later, when her confession exposed a truth no one saw coming. If you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you, make sure to like and subscribe. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments as I share how my sister's lies stole my childhood and how the truth finally set me free. Growing up in Fairfield, Connecticut was everything childhood should be. Our 2-story colonial with the blue shutters sat on a tree-lined street where my sister Olivia and I would ride bikes until streetlights flickered on. Mom, Diana, was a pediatric nurse with gentle hands and a laugh that filled rooms. Dad, Robert, worked as an architectural engineer, bringing home intricate models that fascinated us both. In those early years, Olivia and I were inseparable. Despite her being 2 years older, we shared a bathroom with twin sinks where we'd stand side by side, brushing our teeth and making faces in the mirror. On summer nights, we'd drag blankets onto the trampoline in our backyard, counting stars and telling secrets until Dad would call us inside. Rachel's the bright one, I'd overhear adults say at family gatherings. By 4th grade, I was placed in advanced programs while Olivia struggled with basic subjects. My piano recital drew standing ovations, and my science projects won ribbons. I didn't understand then how each achievement of mine cast a shadow over my sister. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I once heard Mom ask Olivia after another disappointing report card. I pretended not to hear, continuing to practice Chopin's Nocturne in the living room, but the look Olivia gave me stayed with me, a flash of something cold I'd never seen before. When I turned 12 and Olivia 14, subtle shifts emerged in our home's atmosphere. Olivia began wearing black exclusively, cutting her hair into jagged edges and disappearing for hours with friends. Mom and Dad didn't approve of names like Razor and Viper that entered our household vocabulary, friends from the wrong side of town with cigarette-scented clothes and vacant eyes. Small items started disappearing around the house, $20 from Mom's purse, Dad's vintage watch collection, one piece at a time, my favorite scrunchies and lip glosses. When questioned, Olivia would erupt, slamming doors and screaming accusations about privacy and trust. The first major incident occurred just after my 13th birthday. Grandma Mitchell had gifted me a delicate gold locket containing a photo of us together, a family heirloom worth more in sentiment than dollars. 3 days after receiving it, I went to wear it for a school concert and found my jewelry box ransacked, the locket nowhere to be found. "Are you sure you didn't misplace it, Rachel?" Mom questioned, her eyes narrowed with suspicion rather than concern. "You've been so busy with rehearsals lately." "I put it right here," I insisted, pointing to the velvet cushion in my jewelry box. "Someone took it." Dad, running his hand through his graying hair, said, "Well, it didn't just walk away, and it's not like we've had strangers in the house." The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. If no one else took it, perhaps I was lying. This marked the first time my parents didn't automatically believe me, the first hairline fracture in my secure world. A week later, while borrowing a sweater from Olivia's closet, something we still did despite growing tensions, I noticed a small wooden box tucked beneath her bed. Inside, I found my locket alongside other missing items, Dad's antique coin, Mom's pearl earrings, and several $20 bills. Hands shaking with betrayal and vindication, I carried the box downstairs to the kitchen where my parents were preparing dinner. "Look what I found in Olivia's room," I announced, placing the box on the counter. What happened next still confuses me when I revisit the memory. Instead of confronting Olivia, my mother's face clouded with something like disappointment. "Directed at me? You went through your sister's things?" she asked sharply. When Olivia arrived home an hour later, she flew into a performance of outrage that deserved an Oscar. "You planted those?" she screamed, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks. "You're trying to get me in trouble because you're jealous everyone likes me better at school." The bizarre accusation was so far from reality that I left, which only made me appear more callous. Somehow, by the end of that evening, I was the one apologizing, promising never to enter Olivia's room without permission again. The stolen items were returned quietly to their owners, and the incident was buried under family dinner conversations about school events and neighborhood gossip. But something fundamental had shifted. Olivia had discovered a powerful tool, her ability to manipulate our parents' perceptions, and I had lost something precious beyond jewelry, the assumption of my honesty. In subsequent weeks, Olivia's behavior grew more concerning. Phone calls from school about skipped classes, cigarette packs found in the garden, strange bruises she wouldn't explain. Each new problem increased the tension at home, with my parents, walking on eggshells around her volatile moods. I retreated further into academics and music, creating islands of achievement where I still felt secure. But late at night, I'd sometimes hear Olivia on the phone, her voice low and calculated, spinning stories I couldn't quite make out, but that sent chills through me nonetheless. I didn't know then that she was laying groundwork, constructing an elaborate narrative that would soon swallow my existence whole. All I knew was that the sister who once shared secrets under starlight had become a stranger capable of looking me directly in the eyes while telling lies about me. How those lies were beginning to sound like truth to the people who should have known better. The spring I turned 14 marked my first major piano competition at the regional level. For months, I practiced Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata until my fingers could find the notes in my sleep. My music teacher, Mrs. Kendall, believed I had a genuine shot at the scholarship prize that would open doors to prestigious summer programs. Meanwhile, Olivia's 16th year was unraveling in spectacular fashion. She'd been caught smoking marijuana, behind the school gymnasium, suspended twice for cutting classes, and our parents had found prescription pills that weren't hers in a hollowed-out book on her shelf. Family dinners deteriorated into tense standoffs or outright screaming matches. Dad threatened military school. Mom scheduled therapy appointments, but Olivia refused to attend. On April 12th, the day before my competition, I stayed late after school to practice on the auditorium's grand piano. Mrs. Kendall waited until 6:30, then patted my shoulder encouragingly. "You're ready, Rachel. Go home and get some rest." The walk home took 20 minutes through our safe suburban neighborhood. Spring flowers dotted front yards, and the evening air carried the scent of someone grilling nearby. I remember feeling both nervous and confident about tomorrow until I turned onto our street and saw 2 police cruisers parked outside our house, lights silently flashing against the darkening sky. My first thought was that something had happened to my parents. Heart racing, I ran the final block home, bursting through the front door to find a scene that makes no sense even now, 16 years later. Olivia sat on our living room couch, sobbing into my mother's shoulder. Her face was marked with bruises, one eye swollen, lip split, a row of marks along her neck that looked like fingerprints. Dad stood by the fireplace, ashen-faced, while 2 police officers took notes. A female officer with kind eyes noticed me first. "Rachel Mitchell?" she asked, and something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What happened?" I asked, looking from Olivia's injuries to my parents' faces. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad looked ill. The female officer, Detective Simmons, I would later learn, approached me slowly. "Rachel, we need to ask you some questions about what happened between you and your sister today." "Today?" I repeated blankly. "I was at school, then piano practice. I haven't even seen Olivia since breakfast." A male officer exchanged glances with Detective Simmons, then produced an evidence bag containing a note written in what appeared to be my handwriting. "Next time I'll finish what I started. Tell anyone and you're dead." "Is this your handwriting?" he asked. I stared at the note, recognizing a near-perfect forgery of my script. "No, I mean it looks like mine. But I didn't write that. I would never." "She attacked me after school," Olivia suddenly wailed, her voice breaking dramatically. "I was just sitting in my room, and she came in screaming about her missing sheet music. She said I'd stolen it to sabotage her competition." I stood frozen as Olivia described in vivid detail how I had supposedly flown into a rage, punching her repeatedly, slamming her head against the wall, and finally choking her while threatening. Worse if she told anyone. According to her story, she'd managed to fight me off and call her parents, who called the police. "That's insane," I finally managed. I was at school all afternoon. Mrs. Kendall was with me. Call her. She'll tell you. Detective Simmons nodded. We will, but right now we need to understand what happened here. Our neighbor, Mrs. Finch, had apparently come over during the commotion. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching with horrified fascination. I always thought Rachel was such a sweet girl, I overheard her murmuring to Dad. But you know the quiet ones. The questioning continued for what felt like hours. I repeated my whereabouts, insisted on my innocence, and begged my parents to believe me. Dad looked torn, asking occasional questions about timing that revealed inconsistencies in Olivia's story. But Mom sat beside Olivia, arms protectively around her shoulders, believing every tear. Why would your sister make this up? Detective Simmons asked, not unkindly. Because she's been in trouble for months, and this takes the focus off her, I said desperately. Because she's always been jealous of me, because she's been stealing and lying, and nobody wants to see it. That's enough, Mom snapped, the first word she directed at me since I'd arrived home. Your sister is injured. How can you accuse her when she's sitting here hurt? Because I didn't do it, I shouted, finally losing the composure I'd been clinging to. She did this to herself. She's been manipulating all of you, and you can't see it. My outburst only served to make me appear more volatile. Detective Simmons placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Rachel, based on the evidence and testimony, we need to take you in for questioning and processing. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights washed over me like a foreign language. I looked desperately at my father, the parent who had always seemed more skeptical of Olivia's dramatics. Dad, please, you know I wouldn't do this. His eyes met mine briefly, uncertainty clear in them. We'll sort this out, Rachel, he said, weakly. Just cooperate for now. As they led me toward the police car, I glanced back at our front door. Olivia stood there, my mother's arm still around her, and for just a moment, when Mom wasn't looking, my sister's tear-stained face transformed, her lips curving into the slightest smile of triumph. The juvenile detention intake process strips away your humanity piece by piece. First, they take your possessions, the piano competition program still in my backpack, the hair tie from my wrist, even the small silver studs from my ears. Each item disappears into a plastic bag, labeled and stored. Next goes your clothing, replaced with a baggy orange jumpsuit that smells faintly. Recently, I found myself in a situation involving industrial detergent and someone else's fear, assault, and criminal threatening. The intake officer read from his clipboard, not meeting my eyes, family violence enhancement. I didn't do it, I said for what felt like the 100th time that night. No one acknowledged my words. Fingerprinting. Photograph, height, weight, medical questions asked in a bored monotone. Do you have any medical conditions? Are you currently taking medication? Have you ever attempted suicide? Have you been sexually active? Each question was more invasive than the last, asked in a room with an open door where male officers walked past regularly. The cell they placed. Meehan contained 2 narrow beds with thin plastic mattresses. My cellmate, a girl with hollow eyes and track marks on her arms, barely acknowledged my arrival. The overhead lights stayed on all night, and every 15 minutes a guard would shine a flashlight directly into my face to ensure I was still breathing. I didn't sleep. I lay rigid on the plastic mattress, replaying the events of the day, trying to understand how my life had imploded so completely in a matter of hours. By morning, my competition had come and gone without me. The scholarship opportunity vanished. My piano pieces would go unplayed. My court-appointed attorney, Mr. Gladwell, met with me the following afternoon. He had yellowing teeth and carried a briefcase held together with duct tape. He flipped through my file with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. First offense, but serious charges, he muttered. Medical report confirms your sister's injuries. The threatening note is damaging. I was at school, I insisted. My piano teacher can verify that, and I didn't write that note. Olivia forged my handwriting. She's been doing it to sign absence notes at school. Mr. Gladwell sighed. Rachel, I understand this is upsetting, but family violence cases are complicated. Your sister has given a detailed statement, and there's physical evidence consistent with her account. Evidence she created. Check my hands. There's no bruising. You'd see if I'd hit someone. He glanced at my knuckles briefly. That's not definitive either way. Look, the prosecutor is willing to discuss a plea agreement since you're a juvenile with no prior record. A plea? I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do. The conversation deteriorated from there. Mr. Gladwell clearly viewed me as another troubled teen in denial, my case one of dozens on his overloaded schedule. He promised to look into my alibi, but left with a warning that fighting the charges might result in harsher consequences. My parents visited 3 days later. Dad looked like he hadn't slept, his clothes wrinkled and hair uncombed. Mom sat stiffly, in the plastic visitor's chair, her eyes focusing somewhere over my left shoulder rather than on my face. "How could you do this to our family?" were her first words to me. Dad winced. "Diana, we agreed to—" "Listen first." I leaned forward urgently. "Mom, Dad, you have to investigate this. Call Mrs. Kendall, check the school security cameras. Olivia is lying." "The police spoke to your piano teacher," Dad said carefully. "She confirmed you were with her until 6:30, but Olivia's attack happened around 7. There was time, but no reason. Why would I suddenly attack her? It makes no sense." Mom finally looked directly at me, her eyes cold. "Olivia told us everything, Rachel, not just this incident. The pattern of intimidation and threats you've been subjecting her to for years." "Years," I echoed, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? The pinching where no one could see, the bruises, the threats when you'd get her alone, taking her things and denying it to make her seem crazy?" Mom's voice grew steadier as she recited what were clearly Olivia's fabrications. She was too afraid to tell us, but now it all makes sense. Why she's been acting out, the anxiety, the declining grades. I stared at my parents, understanding, washing over me like ice water. Olivia hadn't just created an isolated incident. She'd constructed an entire alternative history of our relationship, positioning herself as the long-suffering victim of my secret torment. And somehow, impossibly, my parents believed this narrative that contradicted 15 years of lived experience. "That's insane," I whispered. "You've known me my whole life. Do you really think I've been some kind of secret monster all this time?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "People don't always know what happens between siblings behind closed doors." The preliminary hearing came a week later. I sat beside Mr. Gladwell in a courtroom that smelled of furniture polish and desperation. My parents sat directly behind the prosecutor, Olivia between them like precious cargo. When Olivia took the stand, her performance was flawless. Her voice trembled appropriately, tears fell at perfectly timed intervals. She described years of alleged abuse, always carefully occurring when no adults were present, culminating in the violent attack that left her bruised and terrified. When asked why she'd kept this secret, she glanced down demurely. "Rachel was always the perfect one, the smart one. I was afraid no one would believe me over her." The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, watched me throughout Olivia's testimony. When Mr. Gladwell presented my alibi, the prosecutor easily countered that the timeline still allowed for me to reach home and assault my sister before our parents arrived. Given the severity of the allegations and the concerning pattern of behavior, the judge announced, "Rachel Mitchell will remain in juvenile detention until a full psychological evaluation can be completed and her case adjudicated. If found to have committed these acts, detention may continue until her 18th birthday." The gavel struck, sealing my fate. As officers led me from the courtroom, I caught one last glimpse of my family. Mom was comforting a sobbing Olivia. Dad stood slightly apart, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. General population, I was granted a final supervised meeting with my parents. Mom remained in the waiting area, refusing to see me alone. Dad entered the small conference room looking older than he had that morning. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly on the table. "Rachel," he began, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. "You don't believe me either," I said flatly. He sighed deeply. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The evidence is all circumstantial and based on Olivia's lies. The psychologist who evaluated Olivia says her trauma responses are genuine. I laughed bitterly. Of course they are. She's convinced herself of her own lies. She's always been good at that. Dad reached across the table as if to take my hand, then stopped short. The court is ordering your evaluation and treatment. Cooperate. Rachel, it's the fastest way home. Home? I repeated. You mean back to the house where my sister fabricated abuse claims and my parents believed her over me? That's not home anymore. Something broke in his expression. I'm sorry, he whispered, rising to leave. I'm so sorry it's come to this. Those were the last words my father spoke to me for nearly 4 years. Within 3 months, both parents stopped visiting entirely. Birthday cards came the first year, then nothing. I was 14 years old and completely abandoned by the family. I'd been born into, serving time for violence that had existed only in my sister's imagination. Juvenile detention is designed to break you down and rebuild you into someone society finds acceptable. For the first month, I moved through each day in a fog of disbelief and despair. I followed orders mechanically. Wake up at 5:30, make bed to exact specifications, breakfast at 6:15, classes from 8 to 3, structured recreation, dinner, mandatory, group therapy, lights out at 9 so. I spoke only when directly addressed, ate without tasting food, and cried silently each night facing the cinder block wall. Mitchell, you're wasting away, observed my unit supervisor, Mrs. Gonzalez, during my 6th week. You need to participate, or the evaluation team will never recommend your release. The Massachusetts Juvenile Justice Center housed 60 girls between 12 and 17, most there for drug offenses, theft, or assault. Many came from broken homes, foster care, or generations of poverty. My story, suburban piano prodigy framed by her sister, made me an oddity, simultaneously privileged and pathetic in their eyes. Survival required learning new rules quickly. Never show weakness. Don't make eye contact too long. Give up desserts to the unit bullies without being asked. Keep your back to walls. Trust no one. I learned these lessons the hard way during my 2nd month when a girl named Tasha decided I was too stuck up. She and 2 friends cornered me in the shower area, leaving me with bruised ribs and a split lip that the staff attributed to falling in the bathroom. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was finally suffering the injuries Olivia had falsely accused me of inflicting. Education became my refuge. The facility school was understaffed and under-resourced, but Miss Parsons, the English and history teacher, recognized something in me worth nurturing. She began bringing me additional books, challenging assignments, and genuine conversation. Your standardized test scores are off the charts, Rachel, she told me after class one day. You could be doing college-level work already. What's the point? I asked, the closest I'd come to expressing emotion in months. College applications ask about criminal records. Juvenile records can be sealed, she countered, and determination counts for more than you realize. Right now, this isn't the end of your story unless you let it be. Miss Parsons became my first ally in this strange new world. She helped me channel my pain into academic achievement, creating a future orientation when all I could see was an endless present of orange jumpsuits and institutional food. The psychological evaluation process was extensive and humiliating. Dr. Warner, a bearded man with kind eyes and probing questions, met with me weekly for 3 months. Tell me about your relationship with Olivia before the incident, he'd prompt, watching my reactions closely. I learned quickly that emotional displays only extended my detention. Anger was interpreted as confirmation of my violent tendencies. Tears were manipulation. Flat affect was denial. I became an expert at providing measured, thoughtful responses that neither admitted guilt nor appeared defensive. I loved my sister, I would say carefully. We had normal sibling conflicts, but I never hurt her physically. By my 16th birthday, I had progressed through the detention center's behavior level system to earn privileges like using colored pencils, having an extra book in my room, or making supervised 15-minute phone calls. The problem was I had no one to call. My parents' number had been disconnected months earlier. Their annual Christmas card arrived with a new address but no phone number. On that birthday, a small package arrived, the first communication in months. Inside was a silver bookmark engraved with my initials and a card signed only Dad. No message, no acknowledgement of the ongoing injustice, but some tenuous connection remained. I traced those initials nightly, a talisman of the person I'd been before. But gradually, I stopped wishing for rescue. The girl who played Beethoven and dreamed of Juilliard was fading, replaced by someone harder, more cautious, and exquisitely self-reliant. Zoe arrived at the facility during my 3rd year, a 17-year-old with wild curly hair and an assault charge stemming from defending her mother against her stepfather. We became unlikely friends after being paired as lab partners in science class. "Your sister seriously framed you?" she asked bluntly after hearing fragments of my story. "That's some cold-blooded bara right there. You believe me?" I asked, surprised by her instant acceptance. Zoe shrugged. "I grew up with 4 sisters. Girls can be psycho when they want to be. Plus, you don't have the vibe of someone who beats people up." That simple belief, the first I'd encountered since my arrest, cracked something open inside me. With Zoe, I could occasionally be the person I'd been before, laughing at inside jokes, sharing contraband candy bars, discussing books Ms. Parsons slipped us that weren't on the approved reading list. When the college application season arrived during my senior year, Ms. Parsons pushed me to apply. "Your test scores are exceptional, your essays are college level, and your circumstances are compelling," she insisted. "Some schools look beyond the record to see the student." I applied to 7 state colleges with her help, writing essays about resilience and educational determination that never mentioned my sister's betrayal. 3 rejected me outright due to my record, 2 waitlisted. Me and 2 offered admission with full academic scholarships, provided my release evaluation was positive. The night before my 18th birthday, release day, I lay awake in my narrow bed, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. Freedom awaited, but so did a world without safety nets. No family home to return to, no parents to guide me through college, paperwork, or apartment leases. Just me, a small savings account from kitchen work at the detention center, and a determination never to be at anyone's mercy again. Miss Parsons had offered her spare room temporarily while I got established. Zoe, already released 3 months earlier, had promised to meet me with real clothes that don't make you look like an escaped convict. These small kindnesses formed a fragile bridge to an uncertain future. In the darkness, I made myself 3 promises. I would build a life that could never be taken away again. I would understand what made someone like my sister capable of such calculated destruction, and someday, when I was strong enough, I would find a way to reclaim the truth. Release. Day dawned bright and cold, early February in Massachusetts, bringing stinging air and pristine snow. I stood at the detention center's front entrance wearing donated jeans and a sweater that hung loosely on my frame. Years of institutional food had left me thinner than the 14-year-old who entered. No family waited in the visitor parking lot. Instead, Ms. Parsons stood beside her aging Subaru, breath visible in the winter air. Beside her, true to her word, was Zoe, holding a paper bag. "Freedom clothes," she announced, handing me the bag containing a bright blue scarf and mittens. "The prison palette needs some color." The outside world had changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. Cell phones had transformed from flip devices to sleek touchscreens. Social media platforms I'd never used dominated conversations. Music, movies, and cultural references had evolved past my recognition. At times, I felt like a time traveler navigating an almost familiar landscape. Ms. Parsons's spare room became my temporary sanctuary, the first private space I'd inhabited since my arrest. Simple luxuries overwhelmed me, choosing when to shower, eating when hungry rather than when scheduled, wearing colorful clothing, closing a door without someone checking on me hourly. "You're jumping at shadows, Rachel," Ms. Parsons observed gently during my first week. "The transition takes time. Be patient with yourself." Northern Massachusetts State University had held my scholarship, requiring only that I begin in the spring semester rather than waiting for fall. I registered for psychology and criminal justice courses, drawn to understanding both my sister's pathology and the system that had failed me so completely. Financial reality meant working while studying. I took 2 jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop near campus and a weekend receptionist at a local salon. Between work, classes, and studying, exhaustion became my constant companion, but also my shield against darker thoughts that emerged in quiet moments. 3 months into my new life, I encountered my father unexpectedly. I was stocking grocery store shelves with yogurt when I glanced up to see him frozen at the end of the aisle, shopping basket in hand. He looked older, gray now dominating his once dark hair, new lines etched around his eyes. Our gazes locked for 5 excruciating seconds before he turned abruptly, abandoning his basket to flee the store. I stood motionless, yogurt container still in hand, as something inside me hardened further. Not even free of false charges was I worthy of acknowledgement. Through a former neighbor, I contacted cautiously online and learned fragments of family news. My parents had divorced 2 years into my detention, the strain of Olivia's escalating behavior, and my absence creating irreparable fractures. Mom had moved to Betrayal, Arizona with Olivia, who had dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Dad remained in Connecticut but had sold our family home, downsizing to an apartment across town. This information should have brought satisfaction, their perfect family illusion shattered by the very daughter they'd chosen to believe. Instead, it brought a complicated grief for the dissolution of something once precious, however flawed. University became my salvation. I threw myself into understanding family systems, psychological manipulation, and the particular vulnerability of parents to believing false accusations. I studied cognitive dissonance and how people double down on incorrect beliefs rather than admit fundamental errors in judgment. Each theory illuminated pieces of my experience, transforming personal trauma into academic comprehension. My academic advisor, Dr. Lauren Fields, took particular interest in my focused determination. "You approach these topics with unusual insight," she observed during my sophomore year. "Have you considered research as a career path?" I hadn't, but her suggestion opened new possibilities. By junior year, I was assisting with her research on adolescent deception and family dynamics, my personal experience informing methodological approaches without ever being explicit. Later, after a panic attack during a criminal justice lecture on false confessions left me hyperventilating in a bathroom stall, the University Counseling Center connected me with Dr. Amanda Chen, a trauma specialist who slowly helped me articulate the layers of betrayal I'd experienced. "You've built an impressive life through sheer determination," she noted in one session, "but building a fortress isn't the same as healing." "The fortress keeps me safe," I countered. "Safe, but isolated," she replied gently. "You haven't let anyone truly know you since your release." She was right. Despite casual friendships with classmates and co-workers, I maintained a careful distance from genuine connection. Zoe had moved to California, and while we kept in touch, our friendship had naturally evolved into something more distant. Miss Parsons remained a supportive presence, but I had deliberately established independence from her assistance. Romantic relationships remained entirely theoretical. The few dates I attempted ended when questions about family inevitably arose, and my carefully constructed answers revealed too many gaps or contradictions. It was easier to focus on academic achievements and professional development than navigate the vulnerability intimate connections required. By graduation day, I had secured a position with the Innocence Alliance, a nonprofit organization working with juveniles claiming wrongful conviction. My dual degrees in psychology and criminal justice, combined with stellar recommendations from professors impressed by my insight, opened doors that my sealed juvenile record couldn't close. My chosen family gathered at commencement: Miss Parsons, Dr. Fields, 2 classmates who had become study partners, and Zoe, who flew in from San Diego for the occasion. They cheered as I crossed the stage, unaware of the complex milestone this represented, not just academic achievement, but reclamation of a future nearly stolen. As I approached my 25th birthday, the scaffolding of my reconstructed life appeared solid. My 1-bedroom apartment featured bookshelves full of psychology and legal texts. My office at the Innocence Alliance displayed framed certificates and thank you notes from families we'd helped. I had health insurance, a retirement account, and even a recently adopted cat named Athena who tolerated my long work hours. Yet beneath this carefully constructed normalcy, unresolved questions continued to shadow me. What had become of Olivia? Did my parents ever question their choice to believe her? Would I ever understand the full truth of what had happened? On my 25th birthday, after celebratory drinks with colleagues, I returned home and made a decision that had been forming for months. It was time to seek answers, not for reconciliation, but for the closure necessary to truly move forward. I began drafting letters to my father's last known address, attempting to strike the impossible balance between accusation and inquiry, between the hurt child and the professional adult I'd become. The letter was never sent. Instead, one ordinary Tuesday morning, 6 months later, my office phone rang with a call that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family's destruction. Rachel Mitchell, the male voice on the phone, sounded uncertain, as though questioning whether he'd reached the right person. Speaking, I confirmed, wedging the receiver between my ear and shoulder while sorting through case files on my desk at the Innocence Alliance offices in Seattle. This is Robert, your father. 8 years dissolved in an instant. My hand froze mid-motion, heart suddenly pounding against my ribs. Through the phone line came the sound of traffic and a hospital intercom in the background. Rachel, are you there? Why are you calling? I managed, professional detachment failing me completely. It's Olivia. His voice cracked slightly. She's in the hospital. She tried to take her own life 3 days ago. The information landed like a physical blow. Despite everything, despite the years of pain and injustice, Olivia remained my sister. Images flashed unbidden, making daisy chains together in the backyard, teaching her to French braid hair, her gap-toothed smile when we'd catch fireflies. In summer. Is she going to survive? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Yes, but she's asking for you. She says she needs to tell you something important. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now Olivia wanted to talk after years of devastating silence. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect the life I'd painstakingly built from her destructive influence, but a deeper current pulled, the need for answers that had never fully subsided. I'll need to make arrangements, I said finally. Text me the hospital information. 48 hours later, I stood in the Hartford International Airport watching my father approach through the arrival gate. 8 years had transformed him from the strong, confident architect I remembered into a stooped man with thinning hair and a deeply lined face. He wore a rumpled button-down shirt that hung loosely on his frame, suggesting recent weight loss. Rachel, he said, stopping several feet away as though unsure of his. Welcome. Thank you for coming. No hug, no tears, just awkward distance and the weight of unspoken history between us. I'm here for answers, not reconciliation, I clarified as we walked toward short-term parking. I need to understand what happened. He nodded, shoulders slumping further. I know, and I'm sorry for everything. The drive to Hartford Memorial Hospital passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by brief updates about Olivia's condition. She had been found unconscious in her apartment by a neighbor, empty pill bottles and alcohol surrounding her. Doctors had stabilized her physical condition, but psychologically, she remained fragile. Your mother? I asked as we approached the hospital. Diana passed away 2 years ago. Breast cancer. He delivered this information matter-of-factly, as though discussing a distant acquaintance. Other than my mother, I absorbed this news with surprising numbness. The mother who had abandoned me to juvenile detention had, in some ways, been lost. To me years earlier. Still, finality settled heavily. She had died believing me capable of violence, never knowing the truth. Olivia's hospital room was private, courtesy of good insurance from her job as a pharmaceutical sales representative. A career path I found darkly ironic given her history with substance issues. The woman in the bed barely resembled the sister I remembered. At 28, she looked a decade older, thin to the point of gauntness, hair dull and brittle, skin bearing the telltale marks of long-term substance abuse. Her eyes widened when I entered, recognition and something like terror crossing her features. I actually came, she whispered, her voice raspy from the stomach-pumping procedure. You asked for me, I replied simply, remaining near the doorway rather than approaching the bed. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll get coffee and give you two some time. When the door closed behind him, silence stretched between us. Two estranged sisters connected by blood and separated by betrayal. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Olivia finally said. That was the plan. I winced, fingers plucking nervously at the hospital blanket. I deserve that. I deserve worse. Why did you ask me here, Olivia? What could you possibly have to say after all this time? Her eyes filled with tears that, for once, seemed genuine rather than performative. I need to tell you the truth. I need to tell someone before it kills me. The truth about what? About what I did to you. Her voice broke. Something shifted in the atmosphere, the first acknowledgement in 12 years that what happened had been fabricated. I made it all up, she continued, words tumbling out as though a dam had broken. The abuse allegations, the assault, all of it. I hurt myself, planted evidence, and convinced everyone you were secretly tormenting me. Despite having known this, reality for years, hearing her confession aloud made my knees weak. I sank into the visitor's chair, maintaining distance from her bed. Why? The question that had haunted me for over a decade. Olivia's explanation emerged in fragmented bursts between tears. Jealousy had been the seed, jealousy of my academic success, musical talent, and our parents' pride in my achievements. But deeper factors had fertilized that seed into something monstrous. I was already using drugs by 14, she admitted. Pills first, then whatever I could get. I needed money for drugs, so I started stealing. When you caught me with the jewelry, I panicked. The false abuse narrative hadn't been premeditated. Initially, it began as small lies to explain away behavioral problems, claiming I was secretly bullying her, suggesting my perfectionism was driving her anxiety. Our parents, especially Mom, gradually accepted this alternative explanation for her declining grades and mood swings. Mom always felt guilty about comparing us, Olivia explained. When I suggested you were secretly tormenting me, it gave her an explanation that didn't make her the bad parent. Dad was harder to convince, but Mom's certainty eventually wore him down. The final assault accusation had been desperation rather than calculation. She'd been caught with cocaine by a school administrator who threatened to call our parents. Facing potential rehab or worse, she'd created the ultimate distraction. I never thought they'd send you away for years, she whispered. I just needed... Everyone focused on something else until I could figure out how to hide the drugs better. You watched them take me away, I said, my voice hollow. You watched and did nothing. I was high during most of it, she admitted, shame evident in her posture. By the time I realized the consequences, it had gone too far. Admitting the truth would have meant juvenile detention for me instead, for filing false reports, drug possession, everything. The most devastating revelation came next. My mother, in her final year, had begun to question Olivia's version of events. She found old journals where I'd written about framing you, Olivia said. She confronted me, but by then she was already sick and admitting she'd helped destroy your life. I think it would have killed her faster. So I kept denying, and she chose to believe me one last time. My father had suspected the truth much earlier, but lacked definitive proof. His gradual withdrawal from visiting me had stemmed not from believing in my guilt, but from overwhelming shame at his failure to protect me. He started drinking after you were gone, Olivia explained. Their marriage fell apart. Mom took me to Arizona to get me away from my drug connections, but I just found new ones there. As her confession unfolded, I sat motionless, years of suppressed emotion threatening to overwhelm my carefully constructed composure. The truth I'd always known was finally acknowledged, but it brought no satisfaction, only renewed grief for everything lost. Why now? I finally asked. Why confess after all this time? Olivia's gaze dropped to her hospital bracelet. 3 days ago, I hit rock bottom. I've been in and out of rehab 4 times, lost jobs, apartments, relationships. Nothing works because I'm poisoned by what I did to you. I thought ending things was the only escape from the guilt. She'd written a suicide note confessing everything. Years of lies, the deliberate framing, our parents' unwitting complicity. Dad had found it when the hospital called him as next of kin. He showed me the note. I said pieces finally connecting. That's why he called me, she nodded. He said I owed you the truth face to face. He said maybe it would help us both move forward somehow. As twilight darkened the hospital windows, Olivia detailed exactly what had happened that April afternoon 12 years ago. While I practiced piano, she had deliberately injured herself, striking her face against the bathroom counter, using makeup to enhance bruises, and creating finger mark bruises on her neck. Check with her. Own hand, she'd forged the threatening note using samples of my homework, planted it where our parents would find it, and rehearsed her story until she believed it herself. I've been in therapy for years, she said quietly. My psychiatrist says I have borderline personality disorder with narcissistic features. It explains some of it but doesn't excuse any of it. When Dad returned hours later, he found us in silence, me processing revelations. Olivia exhausted from confession. His eyes moved between us, questions unspoken. She told me everything. I confirmed. He nodded, relief and sorrow mingling in his expression. I should have believed you, Rachel, from the beginning. I should have trusted what I knew about my daughter instead of what I was told. Yes, I agreed simply. You should have. The hotel room I booked in Hartford was sterile and anonymous, appropriate for the emotional limbo I found myself in after Olivia's confession. I sat on the edge of the bed that first night, staring at the generic landscape painting on the wall, trying to process the validation that had come years too late. Anger surged through me in waves, at Olivia for her calculated destruction, at my parents for their willful blindness, at a system that had failed to protect me instead of punishing me. The temptation to walk away, to return to Seattle and my carefully constructed life without looking back was powerful. I had built myself from nothing once. I could continue without the complication of these broken family ties. But morning brought clarity. This moment offered something I'd never expected to receive: the opportunity to reclaim my narrative. Officially, with Olivia's written confession and my father's corroboration, I could petition to have my juvenile record fully expunged rather than merely sealed. I called my office, explaining I needed additional personal leave. My director, herself a former wrongfully convicted juvenile, understood immediately. Take the time you need, Rachel. This is what our organization stands for. The following day, I met my father for breakfast at a diner near the hospital. The awkwardness between us had evolved into something more complex: shared grief for what had been lost, tentative acknowledgement of responsibility. I've rehearsed what to say to you for years, he admitted, stirring coffee he wasn't drinking. But nothing seems adequate. Start with why, I suggested. Why did you choose to believe her despite everything you knew about me? His explanation unfolded slowly, revealing patterns of dysfunction I'd been too young to recognize. My mother had come from a family where abuse was hidden behind closed doors, making her hyper-vigilant about potential signs in her own children. When Olivia began suggesting I was secretly tormenting her, Diana's personal history made her particularly susceptible to believing it. Your mother became convinced, and I failed you both by not standing firm in what I knew about you, he said, voice breaking. The doubt crept in because experts kept telling us children hide abuse well, that perfect kids often have secret lives. Once Olivia injured herself, the physical evidence seemed irrefutable. You could have investigated more thoroughly, I pointed out. You could have questioned the inconsistencies. Yes, he agreed simply. That failure will haunt me until I die. He revealed that my mother had taken her suspicions about Olivia's confession to her grave, unwilling to face her complicity in destroying her younger daughter's life. She couldn't bear the truth. In the end, it was easier to maintain the fiction than confront what we'd done. This conversation was the first of many difficult ones over the following weeks, as Olivia transferred from hospital to residential treatment for both addiction and mental health issues. I remained in Connecticut, working remotely while navigating the legal process to clear my record. My expertise with the Innocence Alliance proved invaluable as I assembled documentation, secured affidavits, and filed petitions. The judge who reviewed my case, not the same one who had sentenced me years earlier, appeared genuinely disturbed by the miscarriage of justice. The court apologizes for the failure of the system to protect you, Ms. Mitchell, she stated formally as she signed the expungement order. While we cannot restore the years lost, we can ensure no trace of this injustice follows you forward. The legal vindication, while satisfying, addressed only one dimension of the harm done. The psychological wounds required different treatment. At my suggestion, my father, Olivia, and I began family therapy sessions with Dr. Harrison, a specialist in family reconciliation. After arrangements, these sessions revealed generational patterns I'd never recognized. As a child, my father's own parents had been emotionally distant perfectionists who withheld approval. My mother had escaped an alcoholic father only to marry a workaholic who repeated some of the same emotional unavailability. Olivia and I had inherited family systems that prioritized achievement over emotional health and appearance over authenticity. "This doesn't excuse what happened to you, Rachel," Dr. Harrison emphasized during one particularly difficult session. "Understanding context doesn't diminish responsibility, but healing often requires seeing the complete picture." Olivia's participation in these sessions fluctuated with her recovery progress. On good days, she engaged honestly with her actions and their consequences. On difficult days, her borderline features emerged, shifting blame, seeking sympathy, testing boundaries. Her journey would clearly be long and uncertain. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said during one vulnerable moment. "I wouldn't forgive me either." "Forgiveness isn't my current concern," I replied honestly. "Understanding is." My relationship with my father evolved more steadily. As winter melted into spring, we established a cautious routine: Sunday phone calls, occasional meals when I visited Connecticut. Legal proceedings he listened more than spoke, giving me space to express years of suppressed hurt, anger, and grief. "I'm selling the apartment and moving to Seattle," he announced during one such dinner, 3 months into this fragile rebuilding. "Not to impose on your life," he added quickly, "but to be available if you ever want to continue rebuilding. I'm retiring next year anyway." The gesture represented both acknowledgement of harm and commitment to repair, offering proximity without expectation. After consideration, I helped him find a small condo 20 minutes from my apartment, close enough for occasional contact, distant enough for necessary boundaries. As summer approached, I faced the decision of whether to return permanently to Seattle or remain in Connecticut near this complicated family connection. The Innocence Alliance had offered me a promotion to regional director with flexibility to establish an East Coast office if I preferred. The decision crystallized after visiting my mother's grave for the first time. The small cemetery outside Hartford was peaceful, flowering trees dropping petals across neatly maintained grounds. Her headstone was simple: Diana Lynn Mitchell, beloved mother and wife. The irony of the epitaph wasn't lost on me. I placed a single white lily on the grave, not out of sentimentality, but as symbolic closure. "I survived what you helped do to me," I said quietly to the stone, "and I'm going to thrive despite it." 3 weeks later, I launched the Eastern Seaboard Office of the Innocence Alliance, focusing specifically on cases involving false accusations within families. My personal experience, now officially acknowledged through legal expungement, became a powerful tool in advocacy, rather than a secret shame. The Foundation's first initiative, Family Reconciliation After False Accusations, created protocols for therapists and legal professionals working with families shattered by similar circumstances. My father, seeking purpose in retirement, volunteered his architectural skills to design a meeting space where arranged families could work with mediators in a neutral environment. Olivia, 1 year sober and engaged in intensive therapy, occasionally spoke at addiction recovery programs about how her substance abuse had fueled destructive behavior. Our relationship remained complicated, neither fully reconciled nor completely estranged. Some damage cannot be undone, only acknowledged and worked around. On my 29th birthday, I sat in my new office overlooking the Hartford skyline, reflecting on the journey from detained 14-year-old to nonprofit director. The path had been unimaginably difficult, marked by abandonment and betrayal, but had led to unexpected purpose. My phone chimed with a text from Zoe. "Happy birthday to the strongest person I know. Still believe in you after all these years." That simple message captured what I'd learned through everything. Trust must be rebuilt selectively with people who earn it through consistent support rather than biological obligation. Family can be chosen, created through genuine connection rather than merely inherited. The healing journey continues daily. There are still nights when institutional nightmares wake me, moments when trust feels impossible, milestones that trigger grief, for the adolescence I never experienced. But there is also growing evidence that broken things can be repurposed into something meaningful, that truth eventually surfaces, and that resilience can transform personal tragedy into broader purpose. If you've stayed with my story until now, perhaps you've experienced your own version of betrayal or injustice. Know that your truth matters, even when others refuse to see it. Your resilience is building something valuable, even in the darkest moments. Have you found ways to transform your own painful experiences into purpose? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe if you found value in mine, and remember that healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Thank you for witnessing my journey, and I wish you strength in yours.